So this week we are joined by Rich Dodd, and we are thinking about comparison and calling and how all this stuff makes us feel about ourselves. And we're up to the part in the story where David has been chosen as the new king of Israel despite having no experience and no qualifications for the role. So Rich, has there ever been a time in your life where God's called you to do something that you were a little bit uncomfortable with?
Yeah, definitely has a few times. But with this story, a bit of context to what God called me to do that made me feel uncomfortable is it was really this story that made me understand the idea that God wanted to know me personally. As a kid, I didn't really grow up in church. My parents don't go to church, but I'd been along to youth clubs and stuff like that, and I'd heard about God and I'd heard about the stories. But when I heard this story about David and the fact that he really was the youngest brother, that there was nothing outwardly that made him stand out as to one who was going to be the king, it really spoke to me because I was always quite small, quite little growing up. I was always very quiet. And I saw all of these people who would be like at the front doing talks and things like that. I never ever thought that God could use or really want to know somebody like me. And this story was the one that really made me understand actually who I am. God created me to be, and he wants to know and he loves me as I am, and he can use that. And so from being this, well, I'm still quite small, but from being a small child, I grew into a small adult. But I'm now somebody who God called me to speak, to teach the Bible to adults, to children, be somebody who stands at the front, in front of sometimes, a couple of hundred people. And it was very uncomfortable to begin with. I still is now to a certain extent, but I never ever could have thought that would be me. And this was one of those instances where God really spoke to me through it to say, actually, Rich, it's not you that's important, it's me working through you. And that's still uncomfortable, but you learn to get used to allowing God to work through you in that way.
So how has that experience shaped who you've become today?
Well, for my job, I go into schools, do lots of assemblies, do lessons. So I have to stand in front of big groups of teachers, of children. But I also do a lot of speaking at my church as well. And sort of growing up as somebody who was really quiet, who still often in big groups of people, when we're like chatting away, I'll sort of say something and people still might not necessarily hear me because I've got quite a quiet voice. And often, like when Gary's filming and stuff, he'll say, can you speak a bit louder because the microphone's not picking you up. But it's shaped what I do for a job. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I was a teacher before, I wanted to go into teaching. I wanted to be somebody who was there for the quiet children. Who I always loved PE, but because I was small and quiet, I never got picked for any teams or anything. The teachers that I had never really encouraged us to try something new. And I just, even as a youngster, felt that's wrong. And I wanted to be somebody who would give children a chance, give them a voice, even if it seemed like it wasn't their thing, that there was something for everyone. So putting all of those things together, it sort of changed who I was, this realisation that God could use me.
So what piece of advice would you give to someone who's maybe in a similar position to where you were when God chose you?
I think trust God. Remember that he's made you who you are for a reason, that there's nobody like you, and that's a good thing, that God's created us all as individuals. One of my favourite verses in the Bible is in Ephesians chapter 2, and it talks about God has saved us through his grace, but not just for that. He's created us to do good works that he's prepared for us. And what my good works are will be different from yours, will be different from everybody's. And there's certainly things that you can do that I can't, and vice versa, and that goes for everyone. But that God will be there right alongside us. I remember as part of one of the things that I've done at church is that I've led a couple of funerals, and at one of them it was my best friend's dad, and they asked me if I would lead it. And growing up, one of my good friends growing up lived next door to Graham, whose funeral it was. And my friend's dad came because he was his neighbour, he wanted to pay his respects. And he hadn't really seen me since I was sort of 9, 10 years old. And he come up to me at the end of it and he said to me, I can't believe that that's the same lad who just used to sit in the corner quietly and read and not talk to anybody. Like, what's happened? And I was taken aback a little bit, and then I just was able to say to Joe, you know, it's not really anything I necessarily wanted to do, but I feel God's called me to it, that God's given me a gift to do it, and if I'm not doing it, then I'm not being the person that he's created me to be. And I think that's the challenge. It's growing into the person that God's created you to be, but allowing him to show you what that is. And it might be something that you never ever considered would be the case, but God's got that for you. And that's tough, but promise that he'll be with us every step of the way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rich.
You're welcome.